and thank you everyone for joining us today. As Allison mentioned, every year BTQ runs a survey looking at key issues in nonprofit finance and what some of the leaders are facing in the space, and whether that's funding, staffing, technology, governance, anything that's within that realm of finance, the survey covers. And today we appreciate the opportunity to walk through some of those findings with you all. My name is Andrew Paramal. I'm a partner and the nonprofit solutions and market lead here with BTQ Financial. I have the pleasure of being joined today by Kate from CPA.com. Kate will tell you a little bit more about this, but CPA.com supports firms like ours in the client accounting services space. And together, we're bringing you a couple of different perspectives on the information, the data. Kate's view is going to be more from across the profession and how firms are servicing this and seeing this. And my view is certainly going to be more from inside of BTQ and how we are servicing nonprofits. So with that, Kate, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much, Andrew. Excited to be here with you guys today. My name is Kate Serpy. I come to you today with over 15 years of experience in the profession, spent about 12 years in practice, had the opportunity to actually work primarily with not-for-profit organizations and cooperatives during my time in a CAS practice in public accounting. Then I went over to the vendor side for about 2.5 years, supporting firms that were working with a lot of nonprofits. And now I've been at CPA.com for a little over a year, like Andrew said, supporting firms in the CAS space, the client advisory and client accounting services space, supporting them on their journeys to build practice areas, supporting clients like yourselves. So excited to be here and talk all things NFP today.
So just really quickly on today's agenda, here's where we're headed. We're going to start, we went through some introductions. We're going to go a little bit through our methodology and how we put together the survey. Then we'll get into some of the key findings, the things that we took away from the survey overall. We'll start with financial pressures that nonprofits are still navigating, funding delays, reserves are two things that we'll highlight. From there, we'll get into the impact that F&A or finance and accounting partnerships are having on the sector. And then we'll talk a little bit about what's happening with their talent and process stabilization. And we'll close with some strategic priorities we think is going to matter most for the coming years. We'll really close up with a quick recap. And then we'll open up for questions. As Allison mentioned earlier, I think there's a Q&A section that you all have access to. So please feel free to drop questions in there. And she'll be monitoring and collecting for later in the conversation so that we can kind of go through them. So hopping forward, we've seen over the past few years, nonprofit finance teams be really in survival mode and dealing with things that have kind of lingered, the pandemic, of course, unpredictable funding, a tough market for hiring and keeping finance staff. And what the data that we pulled back from our survey shows is that there's some real signs of stabilization. Now, whether that's organizations actually building more resilient finance functions or just getting better at operating inside the pressure and the constant evolution of the space, might be a mix of both. But today we'll go through some of that and really what the data speaks to as we get through our presentation. So we're going to start quickly with the methodology on how we got this data. So we surveyed US-based finance and organizational leaders across the sector. And when we talk about leadership, it's CFOs, COOs, executive directors, and CEOs, much like many of the folks who are joining us today. And across a real spread of revenue ranges from 3 to 5 million, all the way up to 101 and 150 to 150 million. And we compared that year over year against last year's report. We'll talk a little extensively about what we pulled back from this year, but we did want to show you that trend line from year to year. So you're not just looking at a snapshot, but you can see how that potentially evolved over the prior year. And there's lots of conditions around why things may have changed beyond just what's happening within the sector itself, some of those external pressures. We haven't really necessarily accounted for that, but we just wanted to show you how things have changed year over year. So moving on to the next section, I think Kate's gonna pull us through here.
Yeah, so we want to start off by really talking about what those 2026 financial pressures look like, right? financial maturity doesn't necessarily eliminate pressure, but it changes how organizations respond to it. So we're going to look at some of those realities. So, what we noticed in this data is that one of the biggest challenges that organizations appear to still be facing, and I go back to COVID, I think this was something that was really exacerbated during that time and seems to be persisting a bit with some of the other nuances that are occurring across the globe today. But one of the biggest challenges really seems to be timing. A lot of the numbers on the screen here really stood out because they tell us that cash flow timing truly remains a problem. So nearly half of organizations, about 47%, had to dip into unrestricted reserves just to keep their operations moving. That number alone is obviously pretty significant. And then when you pair that with the fact that 85% have less than 6 months of unrestricted reserves, we begin to really understand how vulnerable many nonprofits remain. Now we add in the government reimbursement delays into the picture. 40% of organizations told us that a funding delay of only 60 to 90 days would materially disrupt operations. A lot of these numbers to me sound scary when I first read the report. I'm thinking about the work that I used to do with nonprofits, and these are really impactful, meaningful statistics here. But the reality is that this is not because these organizations are poorly managed, right? It's because you've got payroll, you've got rent, you've got vendors and programs that ultimately don't wait for grant reimbursements, right? One statistic we don't want people to overlook, though, is the labor impact. So organizations that are experiencing these payment delays report that almost half of their finance staff's time is spent chasing outstanding payments. It's kind of crazy to think about what that means, right? We have potentially highly trained finance professionals that aren't analyzing trends, they're not building forecasts, they're not advising leadership or helping program managers make decisions, right? They're following up on receivables. So when we talk about building stronger finance organizations, reducing administrative friction may be just as valuable as adding new resources. Andrew, I'm curious, in your work with the clients that you work with on a day-to-day basis, how are you handling some of that cash chasing?
Well, it's trying to stay ahead of it, right?
Yeah.
Just paying attention to your cash flow, projecting out as much as possible, and just making sure that we're accounting for those ebbs and flows. And of course, for those organizations that have government funding and have invoicing, getting those invoices in on a timely basis, right? Reducing that time to sort of process those invoices and vouchers so that you can get cash in the door, because for most instances it's first in, first out, right? You get those invoices in, you'll get your cash in
Yep.
the door. Um, I mean, a few other things I would add here, Kate, is that this isn't new, right? These aren't new patterns around sort of having these reserves, or dipping into these reserves, I should say. But it's really something that it's worth paying very close attention to, which I think you referred to, right? These are what we will call leading indicators that everyone refers to, right? When the next disruption hit, and it will, you have to be ready. And
Be
just
prepared.
staying ahead and being prepared is sort of the key thing that I would add.
Yeah. Next slide, Allison. What is great? So while we talked about some of those pressures there, the pressures we just discussed, though, have really led to boards becoming much more financially engaged. That was really an overarching theme of this report, is that we are seeing heavier engagement by the board with organizations on a regular basis. We think that's one of the most positive findings, that the relationship between finance and the board continues to evolve. Historically, if we look back, many nonprofit boards maybe reviewed financial statements after the fact, right? You've got your finance committee, you've got your board meetings, you're doing some check-ins, somebody's got some, level of oversight. But today's boards really want to understand what's coming next and are more likely to engage with the numbers on a regular basis. I think that points exactly, Andrew, to what you were just saying, right? Being prepared, staying ahead of the game. So we saw 70% adjusted budgets during the year. 76% requested more detailed financial information, which, as a recovering accountant, warms my heart to hear that people are requesting more detailed information than less. And nearly 80% are initiating conversations about long-term sustainability themselves, right? They're triggering those conversations. So that really tells us that boards aren't just asking, how did we do? They're asking what happens if funding changes? What investments should we be making? What risks should we be preparing for? All of these things that Andrew just alluded to, being prepared, being on top of things, looking towards the future for what's going to happen when these funding delays happen next. So, really, for finance leaders, that's actually a tremendous opportunity. It starts to elevate finance from being, the department that closes the books to moving into that strategic advisor, helping leadership make better decisions. The organizations that are facing the pressures head on, they're not just producing more reports, right? They're producing better insights. So, those pressures have really started to elevate the finance role as well as the board role. Any additional insight, Andrew?
Other than it's awesome that boards are asking more
Yeah,
questions and engaging more
right.
with the numbers. I mean, I think
Agreed.
that's great.
Yeah.
But to your point, that cuts both ways, right? It means that finance needs to be ready to
Yeah.
answer them. And we see this play out all the time with many of our new clients. It's organizations that will come to us in the first few months, their board engagement noticeably ticks up. And that's, likely because there's, some more dedicated capacity and we're able to kind of meet that level of inquiry consistently. So the pressure isn't really just on the board to ask more questions from a fiduciary standpoint, but it's on finance to be able to answer it.
Absolutely.
So we're going to talk a little bit about the partnership impact, and I'm going to pause a bit and talk a little bit about the CEO of a large nonprofit in our sort of ecosystem and where we've worked historically, who always references that finance isn't just back office, it is mission critical. And I love that quote. Not going to attribute it to him quite just yet, but it and we'll take a look at the numbers in a second, but it does seem like the sector is increasingly feeling that way too and investing in some of these partnerships. We talked about boards asking more of finance. In this section, we'll talk about the ways that finance teams are meeting that bar. And part of it is through building more infrastructure internally, and part of it is through partnerships that go beyond some of the basic accounting. So hopping in the next slide, we'll talk about how nonprofits are actually engaging with F&A providers today, and what's changed. So one thing that we'll call out is kind of the biggest number on the slide here is that 81% of nonprofits told us that they're working with a finance and accounting partner. And what's telling is what they're using them for. On the right, you'll see it, you see the numbers there, pretty significant. Audit preparation and support, revenue recognition and reconciliation, fund accounting, budgeting and forecasting, cash management, and cash flow forecasting. So these are not what we would consider sort of basic bookkeeping, low-level transactional accounting. These are embedded with sort of in the strategic realm of financial management. And this is expertise. This is where organizations are looking for support, not only in just accounting and GAAP, but nonprofit specific, where things like grant compliance come into play, contracts compliance come into play, fund restrictions, releasing revenue, and that doesn't necessarily just show up in general accounting backgrounds. It shows up in folks who have deeply lived this in the sector. And I can tell you that's where a lot of our clients will say our partnership works really well. When there are things evolving and things changing within their internal operating infrastructure, they come to us and we, through the experience that we have across our firm, we're able to kind of speak to them.
Yeah,
Anything you'd add here, Kate?
there was a quote from the actual report itself. I remember respondents used the words significant and transformational, I
Mm.
think, to describe their relationships with their F&A partners. And I think that is really meaningful. Again, as somebody that worked in this space for many years and supported clients in this way, the idea that clients are looking, willing, seeking out these opportunities to work with partners like BTQ is really exciting and really encouraging. And I think really a positive swing for this sector to stay in working with F&A partners in this way. So it's really happy to see that.
Excellent. And there it is. 59%
Yes.
of the organization
There it
said
is.
that
I thought it was coming up. I couldn't remember.
well, you're ahead of the game. Kate. Would describe the impact as significant or transformational, and 98% report at least a moderate improvement from the partnership. The single most cited benefit in the report is stronger audit prep and support, which makes sense, right? An organization's audit is one of the most visible things and one of the most concrete ways that a board or a funder or any external party can see that your finance is function is working. But the thing that stands out to me, and really the reason we do all the work that we do, is this first line down at the chart below, freeing leaders up to focus on mission. That's really why we do this, right? When finance and the finance function is able to take off that pressure on folks' plate who are jumping in and trying to get more involved in that function, they get more of their time back for the work that they actually signed up to do. It's the whole point, which is to drive transformational change in the sectors that they serve.
Yeah.
And so that's the thing that really stood out to me here is that 70% organizations said, hey, working with an F&A partner, now we have more time to deliver on our mission.
Yeah, I think about that number in relation to the time spent chasing receivables. If you have an F&A partner that can help and step in some of that cash chasing, right? That's more time for mission-driven work. So that was always the mission that we had. We wanted organizations to be able to focus on their mission. Let us do the back office stuff. Let us make sure you're compliant with everything that needs to be compliant. So it's great to see that organizations are really feeling the power that this relationship, this partnership can have.
And absolutely, it's something that after 3 to 6 months of working with us, most of our new clients, I'd say all of our new clients will say the same thing, right?
Yeah.
Able to sort of focus in on the things that they historically wouldn't have been able to focus on because they're jumping in on day-to-day finance fires and putting them out. And beyond that, just being able to make decisions, right? The financial clarity is kind of the most important thing to making some decisions, whether it's good in terms of expanding programs and expanding reach, or if it's making some of the tough ones to contract or move things around. Without the clarity, you just can't have it. So I did want to double click on that for a second.
Yeah.
So if we hop into the next slide, I think Kate, you're going to take us through
I
this.
am, yeah. So we're going to dive a little bit into talent and process stabilization, which I think, one of the biggest surprises in this report, the funding challenges, I think, as Andrew alluded to, that it's not necessarily anything new. But one of the biggest surprises was really around people, what we saw in some of the people and the talent questions. So really after several years of some challenges in that staffing area, we are seeing some encouraging signs that nonprofit teams are starting to stabilize. You can go to the next slide, Allison. So one of, probably the most striking finding in 2026 is this kind of reversal. I hate to say reversal, right? But this sort of maybe move forward of the talent crisis that really defined our report 12 months ago is starting to stabilize, right? Stable teams ultimately create better organizations. So when we asked nonprofit leaders a year ago what kept them up at night, talent almost certainly would have been near the top of that list, right? Turnover is always challenging to deal with no matter what sector you are sitting in. But finance departments were dealing with constant turnover, vacancies, and that's institutional knowledge walking out the door. This year's data honestly tells a pretty different story. 76% reported zero voluntary turnover over the past year. That's a pretty substantial number. And that news really isn't just good for HR, right? Makes HR's job a little bit easier, but it's also good news for the organization's financial health. Stable teams tend to produce more consistent reporting. They understand grant requirements. Again, that institutional knowledge is building. They build relationships with program leaders. They spend less time training replacements and more time improving processes. So that's really where that talent and process stabilization comes into play. The report really points to several contributors: better comp, succession planning, strategic finance partnerships, reducing workload. We just talked a little bit about that. Oftentimes, these don't work independently, right? Together, they create an environment where talented people ultimately want to stay. Once your people stabilize, ideally your processes begin to stabilize too. It also makes training easier when you're onboarding new team members. It makes cross training easier if you are ensuring that you have backup. And it really does speak to part of the financial health of the organization. Andrew, what are you seeing with clients you're working with in terms of that talent stabilization?
So it's hard. I mean, what we are seeing in organizations are paying a lot more attention to maintaining
Yeah,
their teams. How much of that is compensation, succession planning, and partnerships versus maybe some economic headwinds and a tighter job market, making people kind
yep,
of a little nervous? It's hard to tell. Probably a little bit of both.
yep,
But to your point, whatever's driving it, the effect is the same and it is real, right? Stable teams build that knowledge base and help things move forward. And as long as you can maintain that continuity, it's better for the organization. And once your people start to stabilize, your process starts to stabilize, your organization can as well. So it's a good indicator for sure.
yeah. Yeah, when I think about institutional knowledge, I also think about knowledge transfer, right? And so the
Mhm.
people that you have that are dedicated to the mission, that are dedicated to the programs, they want to gain that institutional knowledge. And so knowledge transfer becomes a big piece of the puzzle. So having those people with the institutional knowledge to start with to transfer that knowledge to those that are onboarding, those that have been around for a little bit less time, becomes really vitally important for these mission-driven organizations for sure.
Absolutely. And intersecting between ops and sort of the program side, if you're there long enough, you're able to see it. And I know we'll talk in a second about the technology side, but as much as technology is important, the people behind it and the process that those folks are following are a huge driver as well.
Yes. Yeah, we spend a lot of time at CPA.com talking about technology, process, people, technology, and process, and the intersection of all three of them, right? And that's why I was excited to speak to these couple of slides here. So, Allison, we can move to the next one. So, it's funny when we first looked at these slides, I think Andrew and I both agreed we could probably spend a whole hour just on this slide alone. Obviously, we are both passionate about technology and supporting clients such as yourself. But it is an interesting slide from a finance professional standpoint. But it really appears to tell us that closing the books faster maybe isn't the goal, but better decision making is. So, finance professionals often celebrate shortening the close process. I know that was a big part of what we did. We celebrated, closing the books from 10 days to 5 days. That was worthy of a celebration. But the value there is giving leadership timely information while it's still actionable. I think that's the key there, right? Is that it's timely and you can still do something about it. That's really the important piece. Nearly 90% of organizations are now closing within 11 to 20 days, which is definitely progress, but still lots of opportunity for improvement. There is one statistic on this slide that we want to maybe dive into a little bit further. We do see that 79% of respondents continue relying primarily on spreadsheets. Now, again, as a former accountant, by all means, spreadsheets are not bad. Most organizations use them. I still use them in my day to day. But the challenge comes when spreadsheets become the system instead of supporting the system. As organizations grow, you typically start to see more grants, you see more restrictions, more reporting requirements, more board expectations. And those manual processes, which in parentheses, when I say manual processes, I mean Excel spreadsheets, they just simply become harder to maintain, right? They are more, there's more potential for human error. One decimal point wrong could be the difference between an organization flourishing in the future and an organization crumbling and burning to the ground, right? I mean, that is the reality of manual entry into a spreadsheet. So while technology doesn't replace good finance professionals, it does allow them to spend more time analyzing the organization instead of assembling the numbers. Technology considerations offer vast opportunity for growth and sustainability. So seeing that 27% of clients that are actively implementing new software, honestly, we expected maybe that to be a little bit higher, right? Because there's a lot of opportunity out there when it comes to technology. Andrew, I know we said we could spend the whole hour, whole 45 minutes talking about this section, so we probably don't want to be too verbose here. But any thoughts on this slide and technology playing a role here?
Yeah, I mean, like you, I was very surprised at that 27% number. I'm curious about maybe these organizations may have already recently gone through an implementation, right? And they just kind of go live. And to your point, the more telling number is at 79%, because even if organizations have recently put in a system, or they're in the process, or they just recently completed one, or they've had one in for a while, they still continue to rely on that. And so that is a challenge and a problem when folks are kind of working outside of the technology that we try to put in place to help them do their jobs better. And that's sort of a question around transformation, right?
Oh,
You know,
yes.
everyone, and we all talk about it all, it's sort of the people, process, and technology together. And the
Yes.
reason everyone talks about it is because the importance of the three of
It's
those
so
things
important.
getting together,
Yes.
right?
Yes, they are.
I always use this phrase, you can put the Cadillac of systems in, and you can insert car, right? Maserati, whatever the cars are. Um, and it may not help because your process are flawed, or the personnel structure behind it. Not necessarily their sort of capacity, but sort of the
Mhm.
structure and how it's laid out needs to be revised. And that's why the sort of looking at this holistically is really how you move it forward as an organization, not just looking at one piece. The technology, which is important and of course is rapidly changing and getting better, but also including those other pieces.
Agreed. You use the word transformation, and that is a word that we use here at CPA.com every single day. We aren't using it for direct clients. We're talking about it for firms, but transformation nowadays is more important than ever, and acceptance of that transformation, the need for transformation. And we talk a lot about when we talk about people, process, and technology. I think it used to be process first, right? We used
Hmm.
to build the processes and then find technology that fit our processes. Well, things are flipped now. I think there's a
Mm,
lot of opportunity to go out there and find the technology that's going to be right. And then a lot of the technology has built-in processes, and then you can build additional processes around it. So the opportunity in the technology space, maybe moving away from Excel spreadsheets being your primary system tool, there's a lot of opportunity there. And it's something to explore and budget for, right? That's a big piece of the puzzle too, is making sure you're building that technology into your budgets for the future.
absolutely.
All right.
All right. So I think I'll take us through this section. We talked about the pressure nonprofits are under, the partnerships that they're sort of leveraging to help them respond, and the people and the technology behind all of it. And like Kate said, we can go on all day on that. But this section pulls together a little bit of the board's evolving role, where we think finance leaders should be focusing their energy, and looking ahead to the rest of the next year and where things might be headed. So if we hop into the next slide, the first point here where I'll call out is 88% of organizations can model a funding loss scenario within a week. When we look down, we see most that can turn around a board memo and an updated cash flow projection within 48 hours. And to me, it was a little interesting because a few years ago, that kind of structured scenario planning really wasn't happening in any kind of real way for a lot of nonprofits. And scenario planning was a huge thing in the space, I would say 3 to 4 years ago. Obviously, there was a lot of things going on. We were coming off of what was happening during the pandemic, and people wanted to be more forward thinking around how to be prepared. But what this told me initially when I looked at it is that this is a little looking back,
Mhm.
right? If I get a notification, can I respond to it with a new scenario? If there's a change in funding, can I respond to it? And the question that we have to ask ourselves as a sector is, are we thinking proactively, or are we just ready to respond to disruption? And we want to be probably living in that space of proactive thinking. And it's something that we try to build in pretty extensively in how we work with our clients, not just sort of responding to the things that are shifting in the space, which we have to, right? It's table stakes now, but keeping an eye and a kind of a longer look eye on things that might be coming. So I'm curious, Kate, if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, what I always talk with firms about when we talk about what advisory means, right? And so when I think about what these F&A partnerships can do for clients in this sector, I always talk about being able to answer a question that the client doesn't even know to ask,
Mhm.
right? That's how kind of far ahead
On that.
you are. You have thought about all of the things that could happen. Maybe you haven't considered a pandemic, although now maybe you have, right? You've built that into some of your scenario planning. But I agree with you. I think there is a lot of opportunity here. And we look at that 8% down at the bottom. We have that labeled as the next frontier. And I would even go further to say that that full scenario modeling is already done, right? It's not happening because something happened. It's
Hmm.
already part of what you're doing on a regular basis. Yes, you're monitoring the day-to-day operations, you're producing a budget versus actual, you're looking at your programs, you're addressing your grant management needs, but you also have in your back pocket some of that full scenario modeling for all of the different things that could happen. Some of it just ends up being adjustments here and there, but you're prepared and you're ready to go, and you've had those discussions with the board so that they're prepared to make decisions when something does happen and if something does happen.
Hmm. Absolutely. So, a few sort of strategic priorities that we pulled out and kind of looking at the information, looking at the survey data, where things are going for the next year, right? And the first is coming off of our last point, proactive and predictive modeling, trying to build that habit of scenario planning before disruption and not just being ready to respond fast once it hits. The next is protecting staff capacity. You mentioned this, Kate, earlier, the time spent like chasing payments and
Not useful.
pulling things together, right?
Yeah.
That's a solvable problem. There's automation, there's partner-led collection workflows, there's other types of approaches that you can take so that you're not having your staff have to take on that administrative burden of doing that chase down.
Yep.
The third is expanding the strategic use of partnerships and like you said, looking for those strategic advisors. Partners can do a lot more than just compliance today. It's a big part of what they can do, and they certainly provide the expertise there. But identifying funding sources, evaluate your program expansion, stress test some of your assumptions, what things can we contract, what things can we grow. That's really sort of the benefit of having partners in the space and doing some of that work. And fourth, we've talked about it, accelerating beyond spreadsheets, right? Technology won't solve this alone. It's really worth evaluating holistically with technology being a big part of it, but looking at the other parts of your organization and not just swapping in a new system and expecting everything to kind of follow in line. So those are really just the four kind of highlights. I would say there are many more, but things that we did want to pull out and emphasize as kind of takeaways from the survey.
I think what's really great about this slide is when you look at all four of these strategic priorities holistically together, they actually all work incredibly well in harmony, right? If you
Fair point.
can expand your strategic use of partnerships, you are protecting your staff capacity. You are likely accelerating beyond spreadsheets. And if you engage in the right level of service, you're investing in proactive modeling. So there's a lot of opportunity here in rolling all four of these strategic priorities really into one larger initiative. There's a lot of opportunity there on the technology, on the people, and on the process side.
Absolutely.
So if we take a look at building the foundation of 26, right? Building on the foundation of 2026. When I step back and I look across the entire report, we just looked at that last slide, those four strategic priorities of 2026. I think one of the biggest takeaways is that nonprofits are really no longer operating entirely in crisis mode, which is incredible. It was a tough couple of years. The pandemic really stress tested a lot of organizations, if not every organization, right, that existed. And so this sector has really made some meaningful progress over the last 5, 6 years. We're seeing stable teams, right? We're seeing retention of that finance talent, whether it be due to the pressures that exist in the economic market or whether it be due to comp and succession planning. That retention is positive either way. We're seeing engaged boards, right? They are actively participating in financial strategy, which is key. I have sat in some boardrooms with boards that are not engaged. And that's not a great thing for the organization. So to see that boards are getting more engaged and actively participating is a really, really, really impactful thing in this sector. And then those strategic partnerships, right? Organizations are using external expertise in more intentional ways. And that's really the key, right? That's what we were just talking about in terms of strategic priorities. That intentionality can really be impactful. And really, those three trends tend to reinforce one another. But ultimately, everybody on this call knows the work isn't finished, right? Funding delays haven't disappeared. Reserve pressures remain. And technology, man, the door that has been open with technology and AI, I put has room to mature. I think it has room to almost maybe take a step back. There's so much technology. There's so much going on in that space, right? It's almost too much. It's overwhelming. And I think that is why we see that heavy reliance on spreadsheets still, right? I think there's a comfort in a spreadsheet. I get it. But there's a lot of opportunity there in technology as well. So truly the organizations, that we think will lead over the next several years won't just be reacting faster, but they'll build finance organizations that are capable of helping leadership make confident decisions before problems become crises, right? Crises. This is what financial maturity really looks like. And so there is really what this report told us is that there is a lot of opportunity there.
Absolutely. And as we kind of hop into the next slide, I agree with sort of Kate's point about those three trends reinforcing each other. We'll talk a little bit about some kind of key takeaways. One of the things that we've been talking about is this sort of dichotomy and split, right, around where organizations want to go and the constraints that they may be in, and how do we kind of bring that together or bridge it. And you can see it here, right? 85% of organizations are planning to expand their programs. 88% are seeing kind of an increased demand for their services. So lots of kind of growth signals. On the left here, 51% of boards approved or expanded a program in the last 12 months, 40% approved new revenue generating initiatives. So going after things and looking into ways to serve more, drive your mission into greater sort of places. But at the same time, you have this operational strain. 47% drew down on their reserves. 40% would face real disruption from funding delays, which, given all the things that are happening with some of the federal funding, that's real sort of concern there. And so that's why it's hard to think that the answer is just to simply react faster. It's what we said earlier. The strongest organizations are the ones that are building that muscle of seeing what's ahead or paying attention to what's ahead. And to Kate's point, working with sort of strategic advisors to get there. But those are the pieces that we want to really take away, that there are ways to bridge this gap of operational training and growth. And sometimes it starts with a better, sort of clearer financial picture that helps us make some of the decisions that move us into more of those growth opportunities. So I don't know if Kate's anything you'd add to this slide.
Well, I can't help myself. I have to say, I go back to that 79% still relying on manual spreadsheets, right? A great opportunity there to kind of fill the technology gap, I would say. We're seeing it with firms too, right? Finance professionals tend to be fairly risk averse. And in the nonprofit sector, I think you've got to be fairly risk averse in a lot of cases. Manual spreadsheets, they can be kind of risky. Like I said before, one decimal in the wrong place or a number in the wrong cell can wreak havoc on whether it be financials or grant reports, whatever it is that you're tracking in that manual spreadsheet. So filling that technology gap, I think, is a really, really huge area for opportunity here going into the rest of 2026 and into 2027, making sure that you understand what technology is out there and available to you within your budget, right? Making sure you are setting aside some dollars for technology, I think, is a really, really important piece of the puzzle here, especially if you are reevaluating your budget mid-year, right? That may be something that you need to reevaluate. But technology is there to help. It is there to help with the staffing capacity issues. It's there to help with some of that proactive reporting. So technology can do a lot of the things that are causing some of these operational strains. So it's important not to overlook what is out there in terms of technology for the nonprofit sector. There's a lot of really great products out there that are really built to help drive your mission forward.
For sure. And I know we are about 5 minutes left, and we did want to save some time for some questions. And so I would say just thank you so much for joining us today. And we really appreciate the time. And thank you, Kate, for providing some of your expertise. It was a lot. Hopefully gave you a little picture of where the sector stands right now from a finance perspective. And Allison, I know we want to open it up and hear what's on folks' mind. Anything.
Yeah. One question that came in, I'll direct this one to Kate first, and Andrew, feel free to hop in as well. So the question is, how can organizations prepare for funding delays?
Yeah, so I think Andrew did a good job of leading in on that one while we were going through the presentation. I think really being proactive about modeling scenarios, right? Understanding what your cash flow looks out, not just a week ahead, but a month, 6 months. What does the next year of cash look like? That can really help make sure that you have the cash you need to pay things like payroll and rent and those key vendors, and make sure some of those program disbursements are going out, even if your funding is delayed. So it's really just about being proactive and making sure that you are not dealing with a cash crisis as it's happening, that you have prepared in advance for the potential of something like that happening. And that comes down to cash flow forecasting and scenario modeling.
I wouldn't add anything. I think that's exactly right. And just being willing to ask those hard questions and engage with the tough answers that may come back.
Yep.
There's we don't always get the answer we want, but we have to manage through the answers that we get. And having financial clarity is the most important thing. So once you have it, you have to be willing to act and make those decisions that'll keep you resilient in the face of some delays or even cuts.
Yeah, I love that point, Andrew, about making sure you're having the difficult conversations and not letting things be swept under the rug, because that can be really challenging, especially when you are doing mission driven work. Sometimes you do have to have those challenging conversations, but if you're prepared, it makes those a lot easier.
Absolutely.
And this next one, Andrew, I'll start with you. What size nonprofit benefits most from outsourcing finance and accounting?
Um, so many organizations would, and I don't know if it's a size question. I would tell you that the orgs that we work with typically come to us are about 1 million to 3 million in budget and going upwards. And there are lots of different models that you can kind of work with. Really depends on what your signals and indicators are internally, and if you are facing some challenges with what we've been talking about, right? You don't have a very sort of clear picture. There are delays in the close, there are delays with working with your auditors. Um, Things don't seem to be arriving in time to make decisions. And that goes back to the point Kay made earlier about reporting. Reporting needs to be timely because it allows you to make decisions, right? And if those indicators are there in your organization with substantial size, like I mentioned, about 3 million or so, it is something worth exploring and having the conversation about. And there, like I said, different models. It may not work for every organization, but it certainly works for many. And there's lots of value to be had with it.
Right. And I know we're at time, but I think this is a really good question to end on. Andrew and Kate, are there any recommendations for newsletters or publications to stay up to date on nonprofit finance trends?
Andrew, I'm going to let you answer that one first.
Sure.
I've been out of
Um,
practice for a little while. I
yeah.
haven't been as up to date as I could
So,
be.
I mean, listen, I would say we at BTQ put out a fair amount of really good content. And as far as things that are impacting the space, a number of periodicals provide really great content as well. Nonprofit Quarterly, depending on where you are, there are different various associations that provide some of that content as well. There are sort of broader audit firms that are always putting out information and content around what's happening in sort of the finance space overall for nonprofits. Some I would probably say are a little bit better than others. And also, I would sort of think about your funders as well, and talk to those organizations and see if there are things out there that they would be paying attention to. Obviously, looking at some of the governing bodies as well that puts out content around changes in compliance and changes in financial requirements. Those are places to go to as well. I mean, those are the places that I frequent as well when thinking about what's happening in the space. And I would say maybe think a little bit broader than just finance as well. Obviously, the AICPA and other places put out some really great content, but there's technology organizations that are specifically for nonprofits that I think puts out some really good information around what's happening in the space, and other sort of adjacent types of organizations that put out content that may not necessarily be squarely within finance, but certainly impacts how you would think about your function.